Alright, so this is the second video for the second part of the reading section in Test 1 in your practice book. So we're starting with question 16 here. So starting with question 16. Alright, question 16 and 17, another pair asked together here. So let's look at 16. The passage indicates the assumption made by gift givers in lines 41 through 44 may be A, B, C, or D. Let's go to lines 41 through 44 and look at that assumption that they're talking about. What is the assumption? And I've highlighted it here. The assumption is essentially that the more expensive the gift, the stronger the recipient's feelings of appreciation will be. You might recall that from reading the passage, and you might even recall that in the next sentence are the words, such an assumption may be unfounded. And so it much immediately says this might not be right. And that will align with what we're going to put as the answer here. C is incorrect. And that's what we're going to put. So A, insincere, isn't talked about here. D, substantiated, means correct, the exact opposite of incorrect, and B, unreasonable. This might seem like a good answer. It often does go with incorrect. These two answers might go together, but in fact, there's really no evidence to suggest it's unreasonable. In fact, many people make the assumption. It's very widespread, and so it might be a very reasonable assumption. So C, incorrect, but let's take a look at the evidence in 17. We've got A, B, C, and D here. And you can read them all if you'd like, but I'm first just going to point you to B. B talks about a different theory. And so this could be kind of construed as evidence for the incorrectness of the assumption, because if you're kind of going through this quickly, you might say, oh, well, okay, here's a new theory. So they're clearly trying to change the topic here and show that one is incorrect by, showing a different theory for something. So the dangers of going too quickly, because if you go on to C here, as for gift recipients, they may not construe smaller and larger gifts as representing smaller and larger signals of thoughtfulness and consideration. So this really is directly saying this might not be right. They might not follow what the assumption says. So this is the direct evidence that is perfect evidence. And again, that's just going to show it's really important to read all four answers to every question, even if you think you might have one that's right. So we're going to put C here. All right, question 18 now, as it is used in line 54, convey most nearly means A, B, C, or D. So another very specific one-word question. And I haven't mentioned this yet, but when I look at these types of questions, I don't even look at the answers. I look at the word, I go to the line, and I find out what I think it means based on that context. And then I go back and look at the answers and see if one of those answers matches what I think. And if one of them does match, I have a really, really good sense that that's one of the right answers. So let's look at it here. Convey here is in this sentence, perhaps givers believe that bigger gifts convey stronger signals of thoughtfulness, etc. So basically what's the parts of speech here. Convey is a verb. Gifts are the subject. They're doing the conveying of bigger gifts, and they're conveying thoughtfulness and consideration. So gifts convey thoughtfulness, basically. We can break it down into that. And so pretty sensibly we have convey is kind of it's broadcasting something. It's broadcasting this idea, this concept of signal of thoughtfulness and consideration. And it's being done by a gift. So something like broadcasting, maybe. So let's see if one matches, and D, communicate, does match. So D is going to be our answer, communicate. A, transport is also kind of that messenger type of thing, but you don't transport a thought. B, counteract is the exact opposite of what we want. C, exchange implies a kind of a two-way street, and there's really just one-way street in giving a gift, so D, communicate. Okay, question 19 now. The authors refer to work by this other author in order to A, B, C, or D. So let's look at this line and see what it's actually talking about. We'll need some context here because it's asking about, why is this done? So here's the line. According to Kammerer and others, gift-giving represents a symbolic ritual. And you can kind of read the rest there if you'd like. So that gives us a bit of information, but let's look for some more context. Don't forget, context can appear before the sentence in question. So let's look here. Why do gift givers make this assumption about appreciation and all that? Well, they're saying perhaps they believe that bigger gifts convey stronger signals of thoughtfulness, etc. And so that's kind of introducing an argument. Well, perhaps this is the reason. And then it kind of leaves off there. And that's the end of that sentence. it gives us the argument but no explanation, which is exactly what this next sentence is going to be doing. It provides evidence. It explains this argument provided in the last one. So that is going to be the answer, offering an explanation. B, introducing an argument. Again, that was done in the previous sentence in that paragraph. C, question a motive. There really isn't any motive question here, so that is not right. And D, supporting a conclusion. So it is supporting. It is giving evidence and describing something, but it is not a conclusion that it's supporting. That sentence that we're looking at begins with perhaps, and so the evidence is kind of provided for a theory, or it's one suggestion. So it's really not a conclusion, which allows us to say that A is the answer. All right, question 20 is asking about a graph that I don't have here, so look at it in your books, but the graph essentially is showing both givers and receivers of gifts, and the x-axis shows how expensive the gift was, and the y-axis shows either perceived or real appreciation of the gift. In the givers section, you'll note that the less expensive gift is deemed to be appreciated much, much less than the more expensive gift, even if that's not reality. So that's the graph. So 20, the graph following the passage offers evidence that gift givers base their predictions of how much a gift will be appreciated on, and it's going to be B here, the monetary value of the gift, again, because that less expensive gift was deemed to be much less appreciated than the more expensive one. Now, note that we didn't even need the right half of that graph for this question. And so if you look at the wording of that question carefully, you can tell, okay, I don't even have to worry about half this information here, and that can save you some time as well. So B. All right, question 21. The authors would likely attribute the differences in gift giver and recipient, mean appreciation, to A, B, C, or D. So to recap the graph, on the left side, the givers assumed that the more expensive gift would be much more appreciated, but actually on the recipient side of the graph, we see that the less expensive gift is typically actually a bit more appreciated. So that's a huge disparity, and we're being asked here to make a judgment call as to why the authors think that is, essentially. So just from the graph, we see that two sides, two perspectives are represented, both the giver and the recipient. And that there's the disparity there. Kind of from common sense, we know that one person can act as both the giver and recipient of gifts. And so that's a perspective that we should be able to have both of. But really, we need to look at the passage to get our evidence if we can. So here it is. People fail to utilize information about their own preferences and experiences, et cetera, there. So that's something that I picked out that kind of leads us to the conclusion that this is because of an inability to shift perspective. In other words, gift givers don't think about when they're receiving a gift, when they're giving it, and that's why there's that disparity. So that's something, again, that whose evidence we got from the passage, even though this is asking about the graph. So really important here, don't be afraid to go back to the passage. In fact, that's going to be a very important part of these graph questions, is kind of associating them back with what you learned in the passage. So big point there. And that brings us to the end of this section. So thanks very much for listening, and good luck.